when a 24-year-old woman who worked the night shift disappeared from her workplace. The police and her family feared the worst after blood traces and evidence of struggle were found at her work premises. After an extensive search a few days later, their fears were confirmed when her dead body was found 5 kilometers away from her workplace. All efforts to apprehend her killer proved abortive for decades. Finally, after 25 years, her loved ones now have answers as to what happened to Lisa Ziegert. This case takes us to Agawam, Massachusetts. Agawam, Massachusetts is a small town near the western Connecticut border. The city is most notable for the Six Flags amusement park. The park is the biggest mime park in New England. It has a wave pool, numerous water slides, and 8 roller coasters. Agawam additional attraction is the Robinson State Park, a day-use park with biking trails, fishing ponds, walking paths, kayaking, and cross-country skiing. Typical industries in the city of Agawam include construction, manufacturing, and retail. Residents in Agawam could not be more happy for its convenience. The majority of those who work for a living in the city commute for 25 minutes or less to their workplace. There are 3 elementary schools in Agawam, in which one of them include the Agawam High School, where there is a memorial to one of the town's most beloved teachers, Lisa Ziegert, whose untimely death changed the city of Agawam forever. Lisa Marie Ziegert was born on the 24th of March, 1968 in Holyoke, Massachusetts, to George and Diane Ziegert. Lisa grew up in a loving, tight-knit family. She had 3 other siblings named Sharon, David, and Lynn. Lisa and her family were residents of Agawam. While growing up, Lisa had developed a passion for music, which made her learn several musical instruments. In fact, at some point in her life, she joined the school musical groups. After high school, Lisa Ziegert attended Westfield State University, where she studied education and ultimately obtained a teaching degree in the year 1990. She worked as an intern for some time, during which she worked several shifts as a counselor at a kids' camp. Lisa loved teaching. She took her profession seriously and was active at it in every way. She had also taught Sunday school at her church. After her internship was over, at the age of 24, Lisa accepted a position as a teacher's assistant at Agawam High School, where she had previously attended as a teenager. There, she worked primarily with a group of kids that had special needs. Lisa had a greater understanding of her students than any other instructor. She was also very professional and worked hard to ensure that every one of her students received the best education possible. Lisa was a very special person. With the kids, she always had a special rapport. They knew that she really liked them and that she treated them like people, Lisa's mom said. In the evenings, after the shift at school was over, Lisa also had a part-time job at the neighborhood Brittany card and gift shop. One fateful Wednesday afternoon, on September 15, 1992, was typical for Lisa Ziegert. She had concluded her shift at the school. She left the school building around 4:30 p.m. and drove directly to the card and gift store, where she worked weekdays from 5 to 9 p.m. Her sister, Lynn, briefly dropped by around 5:30 p.m. to keep her company, because Lisa would always complain to her family about how bored, lonely, and scared she feels while at the shop at night. According to Lynn, during her visit to the store, there was no sign of Lisa being in a bad mood. She said her sister was cheerful the whole time that evening, and nothing seemed off. It was easy talk. It was sister talk. It was a little after 6 p.m. when I left. And then I went home and she was fine. You know, she was fine when I left, Lynn said. By the following morning at 8:45 a.m., Sophia Maynard arrived at the card and gift store as usual to open up the store. She was supposed to start working at 9 o'clock. She was shocked to see Lisa's car in the parking lot because she worked at the school in the mornings, so she was not supposed to be in the store when classes were on. Sophia noticed that a light was on inside the store and the door's open sign was visible. At that point, Sophia thought that Lisa might have missed the school morning shift because of the incoming Easter celebration. She and Lisa intended to stuff some balloons for sale during that holiday. When Sophia entered the store, she called Lisa's name multiple times, but she got no answer. I called her name a couple of times and I figured she'd just pop her head out. She didn't. I came behind the counter. All of her things were there, her drawings, her pocketbook, her car keys. And then I just kind of freaked out, Sophia said. Everything looked strange to Sophia. She felt something was not right. She immediately dashed out the store and ran across the street to a restaurant there and then asked them to call the police. As soon as the police got there, they started inspecting the store. The front of the building appeared to be normal, but the back had a creepy opening. Approaching the storeroom at the back, officers discovered numerous shattered bags that had bloodstains on them. They also discovered a number of cards that were scattered across the floor and covered in blood as well. All these indicated a sign of struggle between Lisa Ziegert and her attacker. Additionally, they discovered some tiny dirt by the door that they believed might have been from a shoe trail. Despite all of these evidence, the investigators were unable to locate a useful lead within the store. That morning, Lisa unusually failed to show up at school. The principal called her mother to check if everything was okay with her, but Diane Ziegert had no idea where her daughter was. Her news of disappearance traveled the town of Agawam, and within hours, all of her friends, family, and acquaintances began to do all they can to bring Lisa back home. The police initial strategy to the case was to develop a robbery theory, but that theory was quickly abandoned when they discovered that the perpetrator had not accessed Lisa's wallet or cash register. The goods in the store were also not missing. The second approach the detectives took in the case was to retrace the timeline of what happened the previous evening. They discovered that Lisa's sister had left the shop around 6 o'clock. They also spoke to store owners and neighbors around the card and gift store. It was discovered that Lisa had a conversation with the owner of the carpet shop next door at around 7:20 p.m. They both talked about a critical issue with their local parking lot, which was being used by patrons of the bowling alley. The shop owner then informed her that he would not take the chance of publicly criticizing the drivers who had parked in front of their stores. He claimed that many of them were crazy and dangerous. After about 15 minutes of conversation with Lisa, he left to go home. Police went through the cash register and discovered that the most recent time money had been deposited was 8:20 p.m. Investigators also located a woman who entered the store at about 9 p.m. She said the store's door was opened, but nobody came out to attend to her, so she left. Before taking her leave, she claimed to have heard noises coming from the back room. She said it was a banging noise, but she didn't think much of it and decided to leave. The police were able to determine the general time frame of Lisa's disappearance. She finished attending to her last customer at 8:20 p.m., and by 9 o'clock, something had happened to her. The detectives were then left with the questions of what had happened to Lisa Ziegert within those 40 minutes. On the day Lisa was discovered missing, the local police, together with the FBI and the Massachusetts State Police, carried out a massive search for her. The search party on foot explored the vicinity of the store while the helicopters searched farther, off areas. Additionally, police dogs were brought to the store area in an effort to follow Lisa's track. Sadly, none of these produced any favorable outcomes. On 17th of April, 1992, the head of the local police department announced that the case had been reclassified from a missing person case to a kidnapping case. This was done because investigators were confident that Lisa had not left the store of her own free will. 2 days after she vanished, the police were already looking into a kidnapping case. On Easter Sunday, April 19th, all the nearby churches prayed for Lisa Ziegert to be found alive and unharmed. Even though it was Easter, there was no sense of celebration. Around 2 p.m. that same day, a call was made to the police. On the outskirts of the town, close to Route 75, a man was walking his dog. He spotted a woman's body while walking through the wooded area. He immediately alerted the police afterwards. When police arrived, they identified the woman to be Lisa Ziegert. They discovered numerous stab wounds on her neck and legs, which she had sustained from a sharp object. Medical professionals then came to the conclusion that Lisa had also been sexually assaulted. Investigators were able to determine that Lisa's body was dumped 5 kilometers away from the store, which indicated that the offender most likely drove her there in a vehicle. In order to protect any potential evidence, detectives promptly blocked off the area and moved in a single line. At the time, it was raining, and the muddy road was covered in tire tracks. Sadly, the cops were unable to locate the murder weapon or any other concrete proof. The sad news that Lisa Ziegert had been brutally murdered by an unidentified killer immediately went around the city of Agawam, the church where she taught Sunday school on Sundays. In her honor, organized a farewell service. Around 1,000 people attended the service. People said good things about her. Lisa was loved, and the news of her premature demise made residents of the small community of Agawam, who were used to living in peace and safety, experience a mood that was almost panic. Many store owners canceled single shifts, and employees escorted one another to their cars at night. Within a matter of days, the self-defense instructors had a lot of students coming in for classes. Also, roughly 300 women filed for a license to possess a gun. The entire community was terrified that an unidentified criminal would attack one of them again. Amidst all these, the FBI and the police were fervently working on the case nonstop. It soon became public knowledge that they had obtained a DNA sample from the crime scene. The DNA sample might have belonged to the murderer. The investigators at some point brought Lisa's boyfriend in for questioning since they suspected him. He, however, had an alibi, and the DNA sample from the crime scene did not match his DNA. Additionally, DNA testing was done on Lisa's friends, co-workers, and relatives. And again, no matches were found. Numerous tips were sent to the police by locals. On the night of Lisa's murder, there were several reports of a strange car. Others claimed to know the offender's identity, but detectives weeded out all of these leads since they were dead ends. The police concluded that a van or large SUV had left the tire tracks on the road close to where the body was discovered. Despite not getting any closer to apprehending the offender after questioning all drivers of similar vehicles, detectives were able to track down a witness who might have seen a similar vehicle that night. At around 9:15 p.m. that night, a worker from a store close by was on her way home. She was at a traffic light when she noticed a sizable SUV pulling off the road and driving in the direction of the spot where Lisa's body would eventually be discovered. Since it was dark outside, the woman was unable to provide more specific details about the car. She merely mentioned that she thought the car included a man and a woman. She also mentioned the peculiar fact that the woman's head was oddly jerking, as if she were dozing off or unconscious when the car pulled into the gravel road. Unfortunately, the information did not help in identifying the suspect. Since then, all leads have been exhausted. Police kept working on the case, but as each month went by, the likelihood of cracking this mysterious case diminished. Before Lisa's family and friends were given another opportunity to learn the truth, an additional year and a half had gone. National television aired an episode about the case in October 1993. The well-liked program featured unresolved case stories that received a ton of attention. This occasionally brought fresh witnesses to the police attention, giving the case new life. Lisa's case was not different. The police received 700 calls from callers with some kind of information within an hour of the broadcast. Most of these leads, as usual, went nowhere, though all of them were looked into by the police. The cops claimed to have found a few worthwhile leads, but they did not say which one. Sadly, it also had little effect. The likelihood of cracking the case significantly decreased with time. The family of Lisa went to tremendous lengths to make sure her legacy was preserved and not forgotten. Despite the early end to Lisa's teaching career, her family had a significant impact on the Agawam's educational system. 3 years after Lisa's murder, in 1995, Her parents donated $11,000 specifically to the school's science department where Lisa worked. These donations were used to support genetics classes and to purchase equipments. Additionally, her parents established a fund for special needs students, which gave them around $35,000 in scholarships. 2002 made it 10 years since Lisa was killed. Still, her mother, Dee Ziegert, held out hope that the case will eventually be solved. She made considerable efforts to preserve her daughter's memories. She partook in every interview and responded to every question from the media. Each year, she assembled a sizable crowd to light candles in Lisa's memory. In the same period, investigators were fervently working on Lisa Ziegert's case. They only possessed one key piece of evidence at the time, a DNA sample from the alleged murderer. They continued to cross-check the DNA sample against databases of known criminals in the hopes that the actual suspect would eventually show up, but months turned into years, and the killer would not be found. 24 years after Lisa was savagely murdered, on September 24, 2016, investigators made the decision to take a different approach to the case. They then opted for DNA phenotyping. The basic idea behind it is that specialists can determine a person's supposed portrait and physical characteristics from the data contained in their DNA. For example, with the use of DNA, experts can determine a person's gender, their approximate age, eye color, and hair color. Although the portrait created using this data may not always be correct, but occasionally, the coincidence of the portrait matching the face of the real suspect is remarkable. Based on the DNA sample of Lisa's murderer, investigators were able to produce two portraits of the culprit, one at age 25 and the other at age 50. After the photos were released to the public, more than 170 calls were made to the police department. People who made these calls claimed to have seen a similar man. However, the majority of these leads were fruitless. On the 18th of September, 2017, just a year later, police made an unexpected prominent announcement. The offender had been taken into custody. He was identified as Gary Shara, a 49-year-old man. The news of his arrest immediately spread like wildfire throughout the media. Rarely do the police catch the murderer 25 years after the crime was committed. As a result, such stories immediately garner a lot of public interest. The moment Gary Shara was taken into custody, the detectives made public how they had located him. It was discovered that Gary was listed as a suspect in 1993, the year after Lisa was killed. Do you remember that federal television program that resulted in thousands of phone calls with leads for the police? Well, it happened that a Seattle lawyer was one of those callers. At the time, he informed the police that his client might know something about Lisa's death. His client was a woman who was divorcing her spouse at the time. They were residents of Long Meadow, a community close to Agawam. The woman claimed that her husband was displaying more attention to Lisa Ziegert's case at the time. She claimed anytime Lisa Ziegert's murder case was being broadcasted on television, her husband would storm into the room and vacantly stare at the television screen, completely oblivious to everyone around him. Her husband, as you may have guessed, was Gary Shara. At the time of Lisa's murder, he was 24 years old and was married with a 1-year-old son. Gary Shara and his wife were always arguing and getting into fights, and soon after the birth of their son, they had already started their divorce process. In 1993, according to the police statement, investigators had already developed the notion that Gary was involved in Lisa's murder, but they couldn't find any proof to back it up. Also, his ex-wife, who provided the information, made the police doubt her testimony, and this is because she had a long history of alcohol abuse in addition to a long list of mental illnesses. Additionally, Gary was granted legal custody of their son after the divorce, but his wife secretly transferred the boy to a different state. It's also crucial to note that this wasn't the first time some wives contacted the police to report that their husbands might have been responsible for Lisa Ziegert's death. There were a lot of calls like that, and the police assumed Gary Shara's case was one of them. Despite all these, at a point, Gary was questioned in an interview, but he claimed not to be involved in Lisa's murder and declined to provide a sample of his DNA. The cops effectively had no other choice since no one could lawfully force him to provide his DNA sample. Detectives later gathered the list of all the males who'd been questioned about the crime, but had declined to provide their DNA sample. Gary Shara made it to the list of suspects, and he was repeatedly requested to be brought in for interrogation at the police station. In 2008, during his third interview, Gary Shara tried hard not to touch anything in the room, not even the table in front of him. A bottle of water was provided for him, but he wouldn't touch it. He gave off the impression that his only thought was how to prevent the police from getting a sample of his DNA. In 2017, investigators compiled a list of 11 suspects, including Gary Shara. Each of them had declined to willingly provide a DNA sample after being interviewed at various points throughout the investigation. In reality, there were a lot more suspects on that list, but due to DNA phenotyping, detectives were able to exclude the wrong men. These men didn't fit some of the traits that experts got from the DNA sample of Lisa's killer. In August of 2017, having been refused many times by the suspects on the list to provide their DNA, investigators had no other choice but to compile all available evidence and go to court. They asked the court for an order requiring all the 11 members on the compiled list of suspects to submit their DNA samples, to which the court granted their request. The cops visited Gary's apartment on Lathrop Street at Westfield Spring on September 13, 2017 to inform him of this order. But Gary wasn't at home. His roommate, with whom they shared the apartment, answered the door. The cops gave him their contact address. They also requested that he promptly pass the information to Gary Shara. The following day, an unexpected event took place. Gary Shara's then-girlfriend called the cops and told them that Gary had left 3 letters in her house. To the investigators' surprise, when they opened the letters, Gary Shara had written in details his confession, a last will and testament, and a brief letter of apology to the Ziegert family. I've never really been or even felt normal. From a very young age, I was fascinated by abduction and bondage. I could never keep it too far from my mind for long. On that fateful day, I let myself do something terrible, Gary Shara wrote. He stated that although he had no intention of killing Lisa, things had apparently spun out of his hands. Gary claimed that he had numerous opportunities to turn himself into the police, but he could not because he was a coward. He claimed that he had endured years of self-hatred. When concluding the letter, he made his intention to end his life known. The cops immediately began looking for Gary Shara, and soon, his car was found in the parking lot of a hospital in Stafford Springs. Another suicide note was placed on the windshield. It was soon discovered that Gary had taken some harmful drugs to kill himself, but he immediately got into his car and drove to the closest hospital, where the drugs were flushed out of his body system. After the doctors were done tending to him, Gary Shara was arrested and taken into custody. A search warrant for both his apartment and that of his girlfriend's was simultaneously issued by a judge. The police discovered numerous items that contained his DNA there. When these items were tested for a DNA sample, it was not surprising that Gary Shara was Lisa Ziegert's killer because the DNA found on the items in his home 100% matched the DNA sample found on Lisa Ziegert's body. Aside from this, investigators also had several other potentially important leads. Joyce McDonald Shara, Gary's wife, who had first raised concerns about him in 1993, had sadly passed away in 2014. But investigators were able to locate documents written by her attorney in which the woman provided very disturbing details. One day, Gary had told her bluntly that he wouldn't be able to get intimate with her unless he was holding a knife. The woman called her sister the day after Lisa was killed and revealed that Gary had returned home late that night. She mentioned that his body was covered in scratches and he seemed very disturbed. Additionally, Gary gave his wife a music box and claimed to have purchased it from the same gift and card store where Lisa worked. But according to Gary, it was an older woman who actually sold it to him. The issue is that there had never before been such an employee at the store. It is unclear why the police was not informed about all of these details in 1993, and it is impossible to find out now because the woman who had the information has died. Gary Shara kept declaring his innocence while in custody and refused to admit to his wrongdoings. He most likely acted out of pure fear, but with that much evidence against him, there was no way out for him to get away with his crimes. He only succeeded in delaying his sentence, and that was all. The trial wasn't scheduled to start for another 2 years, but Gary, who had been imprisoned the entire time, decided to confess to his crime. According to Massachusetts law, a defendant facing a first-degree murder charge faces life in prison without the possibility of parole. Lisa Ziegert's family and friends were in the courtroom. Her mother, Dee Ziegert, who had hoped for a quarter century to discover the mystery behind her daughter's murder, spoke. She thanked everyone who had been involved in the investigation as well as the regular caring citizens who had helped and supported her family for so long. Today, Lisa got the justice she deserved. Emotional closure will never be achieved. Every family function will always be one short. Every get-together with friends will be one short, said George Ziegert, Lisa's father. Gary Shara was sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison as a result of his crimes. Finally, one of the longest-running criminal cases in the state of Massachusetts was eventually resolved and officially closed. What do you think about the Lisa Ziegert's case being solved? Let's know what your thoughts are in the comments.
In the summer of 1992, Angel Ormston was 17 years old. She lived in the middle-class suburb of Mentor in Lake County, Ohio, where she had been born and nurtured. She attended the neighborhood Mentor High School, just as many other teenagers in Mentor. Known for her beautiful smile and golden blonde hair, Angel was a friendly and outgoing young woman. Her friends described her as a friendly person who enjoyed hanging out with her friends and driving around town while playing music. She was free to move around town anytime she wanted because she had a car of her own. The Great Lakes Mall was a popular destination in the community, and Angel enjoyed spending her leisure time there, while also working a part-time job at a burger restaurant there. One fateful afternoon on July 31, 1992, Angel informed her mother that she would be going to the mall's burger restaurant to pick up her paycheck and run some errands. By the next morning, Angel had not yet arrived home. Since she frequently spent the night at her friend's house, her mother thought she was there at first, and no one became concerned. Angel didn't really have rules when it came to checking in with her mother, Jackie, because she wasn't a particularly strict person. Since Angel's mother was aware of her high level of independence, she didn't worry as much as some other parents would have. Angel never had a lot of rules guiding her life because her father, a long-haul truck driver, was also frequently gone from the house. 2 days later, when Angel's older brother went to the mall to do a little shopping, he spotted something that concerned him. In the parking lot of the Great Lakes Mall was the 1981 white-color Honda Civic owned by Angel. He approached Angel's vehicle and peered inside to find her pocketbook and hairbrush lying on the seat. He immediately called their mother, who responded to his call and came to pick up Angel's car. Jackie, their mother, was however still of the opinion that Angel was with Stacy, her best friend. Stacy's residence was the first one she tried to call, but no one picked up. At this point, Angel's mother started to worry and ultimately made the decision to call the police to report her daughter missing. It was now August 2nd, 1992. Angel had last been seen on July 31st. When questioned by the police about why she had delayed so long before reporting her daughter missing, Jackie explained that she believed she had to wait 48 hours before making a report. Jackie once more resorted to Stacy, who was Angel's closest friend and the person most likely to know where Angel was. Stacy and Angel spoke on the phone when they were separated despite spending practically every day together. But on this particular weekend, Stacy had been baking cookies at her sister's place, so she was shocked when Jackie eventually called her. She hasn't seen Angel all weekend and has no idea where she could be. Jackie, who had assumed that her daughter had been with Stacy since she departed on Friday afternoon, was horrified to learn of this. The Mentor police undertake a thorough search right away, and Larry Fisht is named the case's lead detective. He began by thoroughly searching Angel's vehicle, but no indication of foul play was discovered. Additionally, nothing appeared to have been stolen. Instead, it appeared as though Angel had stood up and walked away from her car by herself. However, no one who knew Angel well could comprehend why she would want to pack up and leave town. She was highly loved, outgoing, and popular. She also planned to attend college in the future. Investigators started to look into the idea that Angel may have been taken because there were no indications of a fight. Numerous fingerprints were found on her car when it was dusted for them, but they could all be linked to Angel's friends and relatives. Inadvertently, this made them all suspects. First, Detective Fisher contacted her father's trucking company, but dispatch records indicate that he was out of the state at the time of Angel's disappearance. He then demanded that Jackie undergo a polygraph test, but to the amazement of the detectives, Jackie declined to do so. Jackie and her strange behavior came under closer scrutiny by the detectives. They questioned her about a number of things, including why she took so long to report her daughter missing and if she thought Angel had been the victim of foul play. Why then did she move Angel's car, potentially disrupting any evidence? However, the police lacked concrete evidence against Jackie and were unable to legally compel her to take the polygraph test. The burger business where Angel worked was the last location she claimed to have been to, so the police began to investigate there. When the police arrived, the burger restaurant, Angel's co-workers claimed that she never showed up there that day and that her paycheck was still available. However, when Angel's co-workers revealed to the investigators that they already knew what might have happened to Angel, the investigators became alarmed. They told the detectives about a peculiar male manager they had who enjoyed preying on the young female employees and would frequently linger nearby while they changed into their work uniforms. This manager had been fired for sexual harassment, including instances where he had touched several of the employees in an inappropriate manner. After investigators looked into his background, they discovered that the individual has a history of having contact with minor girls. The employees continued by saying that the manager had a thing for Angel in particular and would frequently pay her additional attention, keep an eye on her while she worked, and make lewd remarks about her. They added that he had found every opportunity in the little kitchen to converse with and approach Angel. Due to this recently discovered information, the manager was elevated to the top of the list of suspects. He was promptly located by the police, but he flatly denied any involvement in Angel's disappearance. He claimed he hadn't seen Angel since the two of them had worked together, and that day he had been far from the Great Lakes Mall. He actually had the timesheets to show that he had been employed at another fast food restaurant at the time. The suspicion that the burger restaurant was somehow connected to Angel's disappearance persisted in the minds of the investigators. They questioned the manager and staff members once more and learned a secret that Angel had been hiding from her family. When Angel told her mother she was going to pick up her paycheck, she never mentioned that it would be her last. It appeared that Angel had been fired from her job for consistently being late. Everyone associated with her place of work was eventually cleared. The police was once more back to the very beginning. Angel's friends and family couldn't figure out why anyone would want to hurt her. She was a kind and trustworthy girl who didn't tend to have enemies. Investigators had a tendency to think that her trusting character may have allowed someone to take advantage of her, and that she may have left with someone who intended to harm her. Stacy, Angel's best friend, was the last person to see the victim alive in this instance. The last person to see a victim alive is typically the one who has done something sinister. The investigators once again decided that Stacy was definitely a person of interest. Police made the decision to speak with Stacy. They had a 4-hour conversation. Stacy was eager to share all the information she knows with the detectives, but her alibi remained the same. She spent the entire weekend baking at her sister's house. She did provide one potential lead for the detectives, though. She named a student at their school whom she advised the detectives to look into. The student was Mark Sotka. According to Stacy, 19-year-old Mark Sotka had just received his honors diploma from their school. Mentor High and Angel had a strong admiration for Mark and yearned to be in a relationship with him. Angel's relationship with Mark over the summer was a secret only to her closest friends. The largest secret was revealed by Stacy afterwards. Angel was pregnant with Mark's child. Stacy said that Angel had wanted to tell Mark she was pregnant before she vanished. She had hoped that he would embrace her and want to start a relationship with her and raise the child. However, Mark was scheduled to enroll at Akron University and was alleged to have just been leading Angel on throughout the summer. He didn't seem to be interested in a long-term relationship with Angel. On hearing this, Mark Sotka was rounded up by the police right away to be questioned. Mark was shocked to learn that he was being investigated over the case and insisted that he and Angel were not even dating, let alone that she could be pregnant with his child. He claimed that although they had only ever had one sexual encounter, it had been a long time ago. Then he said he had a girlfriend and had been dating her for 2 years. According to him, he worked until 5 o'clock that Friday and then went to the mall to buy a present for his girlfriend. Later, he then had pizza with friends. Police started investigating his alibi and began by looking into his workplace. They proceeded to Mark's place of employment, and his time card did show that he was speaking the truth about his attendance at work. When they took Mark's shopping route to the stores, they discovered that he could have made the trip in the time he claimed. The friends Mark claimed he linked up with that night were finally approached. They verified they had met for pizza and a movie at 9 o'clock, but Mark was unable to present any witnesses for the shopping outing. Nobody recognized Mark when investigators questioned staff members from the stores he claimed to have gone to. This made the investigators question Mark's account of this time period. Due to this gap in his evening, the detectives asked Mark to take a polygraph examination. He agreed and did really well on the test, proving that he wasn't giving false information in his responses. Mark was no longer considered a suspect as a result of his cooperation and the polygraph test. The police then reverted to the original assumption that Angel either fled town or was kidnapped from her car by a different offender. They suspected Angel may have fled to have her pregnancy alone, since she knew her mother would not approve of an abortion. Once more, there were no leads for the police to pursue until a few weeks later, when a prisoner at the Lake County Detention Center provided a tip. According to him, in Cleveland, there was a prostitute named Angel who fit Angel Ormston's description of a blonde between the ages of 17 and 20, with a lovely smile, and who was found wandering the streets alone. The description was a perfect fit for Angel. The prisoner claimed to have seen Angel moments before his arrest. He continued by saying that a man by the name of Pimp Daddy had employed Angel. When Detective Fisher contacted his Cleveland colleagues, they confirmed that the police in Cleveland were aware of someone going by the name of Pimp Daddy. He operated his business out of a 2-story building on the outskirts of the city. Runaways, strays, and troublesome youths made up his workforce, but they had been told not to speak to authorities or divulge their names. Police could only attempt to save Angel once. They made the decision to raid the location, specifically during their busiest hours, which was a Friday evening. Police were able to locate the said girl after a search warrant was approved. While she acknowledged that her name was Angel, she remained silent. The only way to determine if this was the missing Mentor, Ohio resident, Angel Ormston, was to call her mother, Jackie, and urge her to travel to Cleveland to meet the young woman and maybe identify her as her daughter. Jackie prepared herself for the worst, but it was discovered that the girl was not Angel Ormston when she got there. Nevertheless, this act did result in some good when the little girl's family was found and she was sent home, rescuing her from a life of crime, drugs, and prostitution. In an effort to get Angel's name and story in the media, Jackie, who was inconsolable, invited every local news station into her home. She pleaded for information and begged for assistance in finding her daughter innumerable times. Flyers that Angel's friends created were dispersed across the neighborhood. In order to gather a sum of $10,000 for Angel's safe return, the community turns to local businesses, organizations, and charity for donations. Within a month, the Mentor Police Department received thousands of tips. Police spent a lot of time investigating the tips, but to no avail. Because Jackie believed the police weren't acting quickly enough, the Ormstons had to hire their own private investigator, but this did not provide any results either. After more than 3 months, Angel was still missing. Despite the lack of progress in her situation, her mother remained optimistic. In case Angel ever called home, Jackie left a voice note for her on her answering machine. As the months passed, there was frustration among Angel's family and friends, and rage at the police station intensified. The search for Angel Ormston ended when a local man went hunting with his dog on December 15, 1992. The dog detected a scent during their walk and moved in the direction of a drainage ditch. The man then became aware of a sizable form that was covered in a sheet and had a rope tied around it. He noticed something that appeared to be a human hand when he pulled back the fabric. Despite being severely decomposed, the body had been lying face down for several months when it was discovered by investigators, which is roughly how long Angel has been missing. Green duct tape and an old piece of clothesline were used to bind the corpse. Police were able to identify the body as being that of a female, despite the fact that it was completely unrecognizable. Everyone recognized the person in their hearts. In an effort to identify her killer, the forensic team collected her bones and started digging through the earth for any evidence that could help with the case. The coroner was able to identify Angel Ormston's remains on December 16 thanks to dental records. The small town's residents were shocked when the news of Angel's murder traveled throughout the community. An autopsy revealed that Angel had suffered a traumatic head injury as well as 2 stab wounds to the chest. Those stab wounds were determined to be the cause of death by the coroner. She had been violently and angrily stabbed. At least the police had physical evidence by this point to try to identify the murderer. The forensic team was able to retrieve a blue piece of carpet fibers which was stuck to the duct tape. In their search for the matching blue carpet, police put together a list of all the houses associated with Angel, including her family and friends. One of those residences belonged to Mark Satka's parents. The boy Angel had been seeing all summer. The house was empty at the time of Angel's murder since it was up for sale, but Mark had been spotted using it. There were only 2 persons with the keys at that time, Mark and his mother. When the police went over to the house to look at it, they discovered it had been sold, but they were permitted by the new owners to search the house. The owners have entirely renovated the house, with the exception of 2 rooms and the basement. Investigators observed blue carpet squares on the steps as they descended into the basement. They then took some samples to compare with the blue carpet fibers discovered on Angel's remains. They also observed that a part of the laundry room clothing line had been removed. This was also hurriedly processed in the lab, and the findings support their suspicions. There was a match. The carpets, stairs, and walls of the basement all had small blood stains, and a bloody thumbprint was also obtained for testing. The police soon arrested Mark Satka for Angel's murder the day after they found his basement of horrors. His arrest came 5 months after Angel Ormston vanished. Mark was still acting defiantly and was attempting to persuade the police that they lacked sufficient proof to prosecute him. Investigators were, however, looking at his car at the same time. Even though Mark had made an effort to thoroughly wash his car, the job fell short. The exact roll of green duct tape that was used to bind Angel was still in his car, along with remnants of blood in the trunk. After being challenged by Detective Fisher with all of these tangible evidence against him, Mark finally acknowledged doing something stupid. When asked what stupid thing he did, he said that he killed Angel. He claimed that he brought Angel to the house with the purpose of having intercourse with her, but that he became angry when she revealed that she was pregnant and that he was the father. When Angel refused to get the abortion he insisted she have, he got angry and knocked her to the ground by his repeated punches. He hurried up the stairs and raced to the garage to retrieve a knife and stabbed her twice. Detectives questioned if Angel was alive or dead before he stabbed her. He responded that she was alive since he could see her breathing. Mark then dragged her up the stairs after wrapping her body and tying a laundry line around her legs. She was placed in his car and he drove to the woods to discard her body there. He went back home to clean up before going to dinner with his friends. The entire time that Mark had been eating pepperoni pizza and having fun with his friends, Angel's body had been lying in a shallow grave. After Mark's interview and confessions, he was accused of killing Angel. The news was quite gratifying to Angel's loved ones. Mark guided authorities to the roadside spot where he threw Angel's car keys before leading them to a remote location where he discarded the knife, which was never found. Mark had a very clear reason for killing Angel. In Mark's eyes, Angel represented a step in the wrong path. Despite the fact that he had no affections for Angel, he would have to provide for her and their child. In February 1993, Mark entered a guilty plea to aggravated murder and kidnapping so that he could avoid a death penalty. Earlier in the investigation, he was able to pass the polygraph due to his lack of conscience, and he has since displayed no regret